talk to our grandmother, Grayce Baxter, about her family history.
I'm present just because of the fact that I am Grandma Grace's first grandchild. And I want to make sure Grandma tells everything like it really is. My name is Mark.
I'm Dorothy Burrows, Grace's oldest child and the mother of Mark and Karen and Laura and Martha.
I'm Vic Burrows, and I'm Dorothy's husband, Grace's son-in-law. These two are my children, two of my four children. And this is my only grandchild, Sonia.
Sonia Grayce.
Sonia Grace.
Named after her grandmother.
I'm Bill Baxter, and I'm married to Grayce Baxter.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I'm Dorothy's daughter and married to Mohan, who's behind the camera.
Hi, my name is Mohan Rao. I'm married to Laura, who's running the camera now. This is the first and last time you see me.
And now we have the guest of honor, Grace Margaret McNally Davis Baxter.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Okay, what we thought we'd do first is talk about the family history and our relatives, where they came from, that kind of thing. And then later talk about your personal history.
Okay.
So why don't we start with your family? Who are your brothers and sisters?
I have a younger sister and a younger brother, Dorothy, Ashley now, and William McNally.
Okay, let me show this chart to the camera. This, right now we're talking about this part of the family. This goes on to the Burrows clan. So Grace, you were the oldest. Then you had a sister Dorothy and a brother William.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your parents. Who were your parents?
Helena, Michael Isaac married my father, Frederick McNally.
Okay.
Their parents, my mother's parents, came over from Germany, and her name was Amelia, and his name was Julius. Michael Isaac.
Okay, hang on. Amelia, and was it William Michael Isaac?
William. Did I? Oh, I said.
You said Julius. William.
William
Michael Isaac. Okay.
And how do you spell Michael Isaac?
Mikolizik.
Okay, so let's first talk about your mother's side of the family. She had 3 brothers and sisters, right?
Yes.
Go ahead and say their names.
Her brother Frank, Julius, and then Helena was my mother, and her sister was Mamie.
Okay, now how about their parents? That you said they came over from Germany?
Yes.
How old were they when they came over?
In their 20s, early 20s probably.
Were they both German?
I think so.
Or Polish, maybe?
Well, there's probably some Polish in there. I don't really know for sure.
What year did they come over?
We don't really know, but my mother and their whole family, they were born in Bridgeport, so they probably came something like 1865.
So, but you're saying that your parents, or your grandparents, were married in Germany?
I think so.
And then they
yes.
came over and had all their children in the United States.
Yes.
So you place that about 1865.
Yes.
And you don't know why they came over.
No, I don't know.
Do you know where they went when they first came over?
All I know is that they came to Saginaw and then moved out to Bridgeport.
And do you know what he did?
He was a blacksmith.
And what was your, let's see, that was your mother, right? Oh, never mind.
Those were my grandparents that came over.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about your father.
Well, my father's folks came over from Ireland and Scotland. My father always said that he was Irish, and the rest of the family said they were Scotch.
He wanted to be Irish.
Yeah, he wanted to be Irish. He wanted to be Irish. His father was William McNally, and he married a lady by the name of Anna McNally.
And do you know what nationality Anna was?
No, I don't.
And where were they in Saginaw too when they were married?
I really don't know very much about them. They settled over in Burt, which is a little town in Saginaw County. They were farmers.
Farmers, and you don't know how long their family had been in that area.
No, I don't. I remember that my uncle sold Watkins products and peddled them around with a horse and buggy. And I always wanted that old buggy that sat behind the barn.
Which uncle was that?
Uncle Ed.
Uncle Ed. I don't know. Do anybody else have any other questions about this part of it? Okay, can you stop it?
Well, how far did we get the grandchildren? Or
There was a blacksmith in Bridgeport, and they were Catholic, but there wasn't any transportation. There wasn't a Catholic church in Bridgeport, so my grandmother, I can remember taking her to confession probably 2 or 3 times a year, but the rest of the family were brought up in the low church that was in Bridgeport at that time.
maybe she didn't need to go any more than 2 or 3 times a year.
Probably not.
Not much to confess, right? Which grandma was this?
My grandma Michael Isaac.
Michael Isaac.
Michael Isaac.
Well, then how did the family get to Frankenmuth, that part that's in Frankenmuth?
Well, Uncle Frank went to Frankenmuth, and he married Aunt Anna, and she was a Hagenauer in Frankenmuth. So that's how he got to Frankenmuth, and he worked at Star of the West Milling Company there.
And that was Noni's brother?
Brother. And then the other brother, Julius, thought he probably did have TB at that time, and he went out to Colorado because he figured it was good for his health, and there he met Aunt Ella, and they had a grocery store. They had a grocery store in Castle Rock, and then they had a grocery store in Denver, and then he retired from the grocery store.
Did they move
But
back to Bridgeport?
No, they never came back, except after Uncle Mike died. Then Aunt Ella came back and lived here about 8 years, probably before she died. I think she lived here maybe 10 years. And they had no children. And Uncle Frank, the one that was out in Frankenmuth, had 2 daughters, Alice and Helen.
Tell us some of the things that occurred with Aunt Ella when she came back. Some
Aunt Ella was a story in itself. She always had done everything that Uncle Mike said. She never had a permanent until she came to Bridgeport because Uncle Mike said she didn't need one. And everything that Uncle Mike said, why, she said yes. So I'm surprised that she lived as long as she did after Uncle Mike died. She had an apartment about a block and a half away from us. And Jerry and Helen, being Catholic, took her to church every Sunday. And one of the things that the kids always laugh about is, what was it? She had 12 bottles of Get Set in the cupboard when we went to clean out her place. Eventually, she couldn't stay by herself anymore, and she was finished up her life at St. Francis Home.
Telephone company story.
Oh, she used to call the telephone company and say, "My dear, could you tell me what time it is? My clock is stopped." So they'd tell her what time it was. And a few minutes later, she'd call and she'd probably get another operator. And, "My dear, could you tell me what time it is? My clock is stopped." But that Christmas, she got something like 25 or 27 Christmas cards from the people at the telephone company that thought the poor soul was all by herself and had no friends.
So what was your mother like?
My mother was a teacher. She went to Ferris Institute when it was Ferris Teachers College, and she taught school before she was married. After she was married, she never worked until my father died, and then she became postmaster of the post office in Bridgeport until she got sick and couldn't work anymore. But after the kid's father died, she really did a lot about taking care of the kids and helping out.
How old was your father when he died?
He was about 59. He was killed in a car accident up at Standish.
When she was the postmaster, did she collect stamps, or did you collect stamps?
She collects stamps, and we divided the stamps up after my mother died. We just made 3 different piles. Of course, we split the whole group up. And Uncle Jerry gave them to the nuns, supposedly, for a tax deduction. I still got my share, and my brother still got his share.
I have lots of good memories of her. She would invite me to come and stay overnight and gave me lots of extra attention. And this grade school was next door to her house, so I would go over for lunch sometimes. A very important person in my life.
Tell us about some of the houses that you lived in Bridgeport.
Well, the first house that we lived in Bridgeport, we moved from out on the farm to Bridgeport when I was about 6. And the first house we live in is still standing, and it looks terrible. I don't think they've done anything to it since we left, and that must be 70 years ago. And then we bought the
Tower Road?
No, it was on the Dixie, next door to Lunchwalker's house, and Ott's live on the other side, just a block from the stoplight. And then when I grew up, we lived in the house next to the school where I went to school next door to where your mother used to come next door to have her lunch or something. And then I went to Saginaw High after that. And let's see, I was in the 9th grade. There were 3 or 4 of us in the 9th grade graduating class from Bridgeport. And then I went to Saginaw High. And after that, I went to Saginaw County Normal, which was the last year of having a normal school where you could go and be a teacher the next year.
How were your grades? You didn't get held back?
I hope not. I didn't. I didn't. The first year I started teaching, I made $35 a month.
What were you
That was big
teaching?
pay. First through the 8th grade.
Oh.
And then the next year, I doubled my salary. I got $70 a month. And after that, I didn't teach anymore until
Because you got married?
I got married, had your mother, and I just was no reason for me to go back then.
So where were you living at the time?
In Bridgeport, in that same house.
Same house.
Oh, I should tell you about the restaurant. When I was about in the 10th grade, they opened a restaurant called the Lincoln Tavern. And we served very good meals there. My grandmother, Mark, made the apple pies for the restaurant.
She comes by naturally.
And at that time, we lived with my grandmother, except my mother and dad lived in the restaurant in one room there. And then after that, they opened another restaurant and had fish fries on Friday night. It started out all you could eat for 25 cents. It got up to $1. And probably the biggest night that we had, we served about 900 pounds of fish, and we had a kitchen that was maybe, bigger than 10 by 15. It was just terrible to get around in there. We'd have been closed up if we'd have had the health authorities around like we do now.
Did you ever serve buttermilk pancakes?
No, I never served buttermilk pancakes, but I made apple pies. But I hated the fish fries because, y'all smell so like fish, and it was on a Friday night, and you could never have a date on Friday night because you had to work. And I'd say, well, let Dorothy do it once in a while, and well, Dorothy doesn't like to do it, and you do, so I did it.
Whose restaurant was this?
It was my folks.
Your family's restaurant.
Yeah.
And how long did they keep that going?
Oh, that was maybe a couple of years.
When you were in high school?
No, it was after I was out.
Was it a moneymaker, Grayce? It sounded like.
Oh, I probably made a little money, but it was when times were bad. 25 cents is probably as much as $25 is now.
This is Depression?
Yeah. Well, the Depression came along in what, 1930?
30s to 34.
Yeah, seeing I graduated in 32, and all that next few years was terrible. There was an old Mr. Beach that, my dad would always call anyone in from the street, say, come on in and eat with us. And this old Mr. Beach lived down around the corner. Dorothy probably remembers him. And I can remember my mother giving him 50 cents to go down and get a loaf of bread and a pound of butter. And he came home and only had a few cents left, and he didn't know what this country was coming to, that a loaf of bread and a pound of butter cost that much money.
You didn't tell us about your father.
Well, my father was a farmer until we moved into Bridgeport, and that was about when I was 6 years old. And then he sold the farm and moved into Bridgeport and started road building. He built the road between Indian River and Wolverine, and it was out of his territory, really. he lost just about everything while he was on that job because it was sandy territory and they didn't have the engineering that they do now to do what they do now. So then after that, he came back and worked for the State Highway Department. And then he was up north. This was the 15th of November, and he was up north and coming back. He had another car head-on at Standish and was killed immediately. And the other couple was killed also, and they had 2 small children. So I don't really know, what happened to them, to that family. But my dad was killed the night, well, Morris was a baby, and he came down with the chicken pox that night. And he was fussy all night. Mother says, well, I thought you were just letting him cry. And I said, well, I wasn't just letting him cry, but he wasn't feeling good and he had chicken pox. So that was that.
How old were you when your dad was killed?
Well, he was killed. Oh gosh, I don't remember how. I was married and had, Morris was a baby then. He was 6 months old. So that must be, well, Morris was 50 last April, so he's been gone like 49 years. And I have a sister, Dorothy. She is a nurse, and she graduated from St. Mary's Nursing School, and she worked until she got married. She married Jerry Ashley, and they have 3 children, Tom, Cam, and Paul. And my brother Bill, I was in business with him for quite a while, and he married Marge Wagner, and they had 4 children, Brian, Jeff, Pat, and Dwight. And they have some grandchildren too.
So I want to ask, when your dad died, then your mom had to go back to work?
Then she started in the post office.
Oh, was she pretty much penniless then?
Well,
since he'd lost all the...
yeah, pretty much they didn't have a lot. So, and after she got into the post office, then things started looking better for her. But at that time too, it was probably the end of the Depression when nobody had much of anything. No Social Security or very little insurance.
How did you meet your husband?
Well,
Husband.
I met him when we had the restaurant where we had those fish fries. And he had a
Good
little,
for something, huh?
yeah. He had a gas station, and he used to come over and he'd have a hamburger once in a while, or have something for lunch or something for dinner. And that's why I met him.
How old were you?
Probably 18, just a young kid. And then we were married, and at that time, he and his brother bought 1 truck to haul sugar beets. He was born and raised in Fairgrove, and Fairgrove was famous for their sugar beets, and so he and Uncle Morris bought a sugar beet truck and started hauling sugar beets. Then from there it led to buying a semi and hauling for Consolidated Freight Company. And they made trips from Saginaw or Flint or Bay City to Chicago, and Lyle drove the part from Kalamazoo. At that time we moved to Kalamazoo, so then he would drive from Kalamazoo to Saginaw or wherever the load was going and come back to Kalamazoo, and then Morris would take it from Kalamazoo to Chicago. And that went on for a few years, and eventually Muhlenbeck's were selling out their business, so they decided that they would buy Muhlenbeck's trucking business, and they changed the name to Davis Cartage Company and bought property on Hess Street to have as their office. And
So what that company was just trucking only?
yeah, semis, and they branched out. At one time they were selling, or they were trucking for Sears and Roebuck, making deliveries and things for them.
How many trucks did they end up with?
Well, I can remember asking one time how many, and they said they didn't know. So it was quite a few. And that was, it was several years that they were doing that. well, we came back from Kalamazoo. We'd lived there maybe. Well, Dorothy was born in Saginaw, and Jerry was born in Kalamazoo, and then Morris was born back in Saginaw, so it was within that length of time.
Couple years.
Yeah. And eventually, Uncle Bill got into the picture. He had graduated from University of Michigan Aeronautical Engineering, and he went to work for Melville Iron. And Morris and Lyle talked him into buying a truck crane. So that's how McNally Davis got started, was with one truck crane. And as time went on, why they just increased and they diversified. They had truck cranes and they had bulldozers, and in a year or two, Tom McNally decided he was going to sell his paving equipment. So we bought McNally's paving equipment, and that's how we got into the paving business of it. And that sort of expanded, and it ended up.
McNally Davis Company?
Well, McNally Davis Company expanded, but and bought the paving equipment. And eventually, I didn't think Uncle Morris was doing very well by me. And Mrs. Denning used to tell me, well, did Morris tell you this or did he do that? And I
Is this
said,
after your Lyle died?
yeah. And so that's why we decided to, and Morris wanted to move the business over to Carlton, and I didn't want to go over there. Bill said, my brother said, why don't we, I sold my interest in Davis Cartage, and Morris sold his interest in McNally Davis to me, so we split up. And that's when we started the office out on Genesee Street and on the Dixie Highway in Bridgeport.
So tell us about Lyle's death.
Well, he was only sick about a week. We'd gone down to the bowling alley and bowled a few games and ate. And then friends of ours, Walt and Gibby Zott, were being moved to Danville, Illinois. So we went over there. They were having a little farewell party, and we only stayed maybe half an hour, and Lyle said, well, do you mind if we go home? He didn't feel good. So we went home. That was on a Friday night, and Saturday he was delirious, and Sunday, I guess it was on Monday, we put him in the hospital, and he died a week from that Monday. And he never did really, only by spurts he would come to and kind of know somebody, but outside of that, well, he didn't. On Thursday, I think they operated, and he had a ruptured appendix and a peritonitis had set in, and they thought he had liver problems, but they never did prove that, and Grandma Davis didn't want to have an autopsy, so we didn't have an autopsy. So we always have been wondering, for sure, just what it was. And that was, well, he died on June 30th, which was 3 days after Jim's 5th birthday, and was buried July 3rd. And then, at that time, when he died, we were building a house on Dixie Court, and it was all roughed in. But at that time, I thought, gee, I don't want to go out on Dixie Court. That it was a nice street with nice homes, but that would mean every time the kids wanted to go someplace, I'd have to take them. So there was well, backtracking a little bit, there was an old house across from my mother's that we bought at one time and fixed it up and lived in there for a short time before we went to Kalamazoo. And we bought it, the house and lot, plus an extra lot, I think it was for $600. We sold the house for $1,200 when we moved to Kalamazoo. And then when I decided I didn't want to live on Dixie Court, we came back and I bought that vacant lot, which is the house on Sherman Street that your mother grew up in pretty much. And I think I paid something like $1,200 then for the lot, an empty lot that was full of berry bushes and stuff. That's just an old lot.
So how'd you get the house built?
Well, Carl Litzner, the fellow that we were going to have build a house on Dixie Court, we talked to him, and I think they were all feeling kind of sorry for me. he decided he gave me a good house plan that he thought would be good for the kids, and he did finish the house on Dixie Court too. Yeah.
Great house.
Yeah.
So is it near the house you were in before you moved to Kalamazoo?
Right next door to
Oh,
the
next
house.
door.
Next door to the house.
The Williams' house.
In Williams'
Williams'
old
Of
house.
course, it didn't
Yeah.
look anything like it does
Yeah,
now.
it's redone.
No. They added on to it a couple of times.
How were you financially when your husband died?
Not very good. That's why I had to go to work. I didn't get any Social Security or anything, and I worked in the office for McNally Davis, where I really started out for Davis Cartage, and Mrs. Denning was a good bookkeeper, and she was very sympathetic and showed me how to keep the books and balance a checking account, and do all that. So then I worked there, and
How many hours a week did you work?
well, I suppose I was supposed to work 40 hours a week, but I really didn't, because I couldn't go to work until everybody went to school in the morning, and then I'd run home at noon, and then I'd be home maybe 4:30 or so.
What did you do at noon?
I ran home at noon and maybe did some ironing or did some washing or peeled some potatoes. And when the kids would come home, they'd say, "What's for dessert?" They wouldn't say, "What's for dinner?" It's "What's for dessert?"
So
So
much for the potatoes, huh?
I hear all of that.
Why didn't you get any Social Security?
well, I don't remember whether I couldn't live on what I would get, so I was making more if I worked with the company, but I didn't get anything. So
Well, now I would think you would get assistance for the children. Was that not true then?
no, there wasn't anything. After your dad died, Mr. Munger sold me a policy that would pay something for Jim and Morris monthly after they graduate from high school, so they could go to college. But it was maybe only $20 a month or something. But at that time, $20 was helpful.
So how did you raise your children doing all this?
That's a good question. I don't really know. Your mother was a lot of help with raising
How old
them.
was she then?
She was 12, weren't you, Dorothy? When Jim was 5, Morris was 7, Jerry was 11, and your mother was 12.
Well, Noni helped a lot.
Yeah.
Bill helped a lot. Fred Schraub did a lot with the boys, especially Jim and Morris.
Yeah.
Who's Noni?
Grandma.
Mother's mother.
Amelia?
No. Alina.
Alina.
Well, we lived across from my mother, and you always felt safe that there was someone around, and she was in the post office, which was a block away. And Dorothy was very good with the kids. I always felt sorry that she had to put up with so much from her brothers.
I suffered too much.
We can relate.
But when I'd come home, there'd be Dorothy and Joanne Clark and Sandy Schra, and was Jessie over there, and Beaver. The girls would always collect around at our house, and Morris had Fred Schra, and Noni and Bill ate at our house every night when before Bill got married and moved away. They were there all the time. So it was good to have family close by.
Did you ever have some wild stories of bringing up the kids you like?
A lot of wild stories. Dorothy could tell you more than I can. She got mad at her brother one day and flew with a frying pan at him.
I know that.
And they, in the landing of the stairway going upstairs, there was 2 windows that went down over a family room that was in the back. And if she'd send them upstairs to the room, they'd jump out the window and come around the house laughing at her. I can remember once Jerry sassed me, and I happened to be standing beside him, and I just gave him a little backhander like that. I thought, oh my gosh, he's so big he could just knock me down if he wanted to. But never had any of those problems.
And how about when they ran into each other at school?
Well, they were just out playing at recess and coming around the corner, and one ran into the other. I think it cracked Jerry's collarbone and cut Dorothy's forehead.
When you were raising the kids and trying to get through.
Well, I don't think that I ever worried about Dorothy, except when she was learning to drive, and about the time she took the car, I'd decide to wash windows or scrub the floors or do something, so I wouldn't have to think too much about what might happen. Of course, the boys always kid her about when she was driving up to Fairgrove, and I said, "Now slow down, Dorothy, here comes a corner." And so she slowed down, she slammed on the brakes, and everybody went flying. And of course, they weren't going to let her forget that. And the boys, they were always fast drivers, and at that time, they would get so many tickets, and so then their license would be taken away, and that used to embarrass me. They would put their names in the paper. So-and-so had their license, all these people had their license taken away, and Lyle Davis, James Davis, Morris Davis had their license taken away. And
Did they stay out late all the time?
yes, they stayed out late, and at that time there was a part of the expressway that wasn't open, but I always visualized them out there speeding, and I guess now I found out that that's where they was out there speeding.
You believe?
Did Dorothy ever get any speeding tickets?
Not that I know of.
She got some braking tickets, right?
No.
So did they do poorly in school?
Well, they had lots of fun in school.
Oh.
Yeah, Dorothy did fine. The boys had a good time. They managed to get through, but that's it.
Play sports?
Yeah. Morris was a great swimmer, and he broke lots of records when he went to Saginaw High. And Jerry was a good basketball and football player, and Jim was a good football player, and he went up to Leelanau Schools, which was a private school. And then he won a scholarship to go to University of Miami down in Coral Gables. A full scholarship, but he didn't. He stayed there for the 1 year, but he didn't want to stay any longer.
This is Jim?
Jim, yeah. And Jerry went to, probably every college around, as well as Morris did. And finally, Morris graduated from Western, and Jim graduated from Northern. But Morris had gone to Northern too. And Jerry didn't graduate. He lacked 6 credits, I think, of graduating, but I guess he's doing all right without his college certificate. And let me see, Dorothy, you were the first one to get married, weren't you? And she had Mark, which is the first grandchild. And then Jerry was next, and he married Helen Ryan. And, well, Dorothy has 4 children. Helen and Jerry have 5. And Morris has 1. And Jim had 4, and they adopted 2. So that makes 16 grandchildren.
How about great-grandchildren?
4.
Who
Jerry,
was the first?
Jerry and Helen. Jerry and Helen had the first grandchild, so it's my first great grandchild, little Lyle. And then
You said Jerry and Helen. Well,
Jerry and Helen had their first grandchild.
but it was Lyle and Julie that had the child.
Lyle and Julie had the child. And then they had a little girl, and then Todd, Jerry's third son, had have a little girl. And then Laura and Mohan, and they have Sonia. So
Tell us about how you met Bill Baxter.
oh, I'd love to tell you how I met Bill Baxter. He was selling pipe for Lamar Pipe Company, and when we were doing road paving and everything, he'd come in and try to sell pipe. Jerry always gave him a hard time. But I'd known Bill for quite a while. How long had I known you, Bill? 4 or 5 years, probably. And then we started dating. the first date we went to Windsor to a nightclub, and then a couple of times we went up to Tawas. Now it's hard to get him out of Bridgeport. He'll say, I'll go out to eat, but I'm not going out of Bridgeport.
How old are you when you got remarried?
Let me see, 42?
How old are you? Tell your birthday, you ever take.
My birth date is November 27th, 1914. And
So how long did you date Bill before he proposed to you?
not very long before he proposed. But it was probably a year after we'd been dating that we got married. I guess after that, Dorothy, you got married that next August. And Jerry and Helen got married the following May, I think. And Jim and Judy.
Marriages in the family.
Yeah,
Busy time for a while.
yeah. And Morris and Molly were married a couple of years after that. And Jim and Judy maybe about 3 years or 4.
Did Bill ever sell Jerry any pipe
I think he did. He must have.
before you were married?
I think so. Yes, yes.
You sure hung out enough, right?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting work. Well, and then after I retired, I decided retirement wasn't really what I wanted. So
How old were you when you retired?
gosh, how old was I? I don't know. I'm trying. Maybe 50. Maybe 50. And then we decided to open a travel agency, Suburban Travel Service, and that I really liked. But we got so busy, and I was getting older where I didn't need that pressure, so we finally sold that to Frankenmuth Travel Service.
How long did you keep it?
We started in 1969, and sold it in 1985.
Did you buy from somebody else?
No, we opened it on our own.
What year were you Bridgeport Citizen of the Year?
Oh, I was Bridgeport Citizen of the Year in 1980.
1980. And what did that entail?
Well, it just entailed having a dinner, but I guess the reason I got it was I'd been active in the Chamber of Commerce, and Lyle Gerald, young Lyle, had to write an essay about somebody he knew, and he wrote about me. And so then when they were looking for a Citizen of the Year, he sent it in, and when they read it, right away they said, well, you're going to be the Citizen of the Year. So
I didn't know
That
that
was-
was something to do to Lyle's.
yeah,
Essay.
it was Lottie, his essay that he wrote for
A nice honor.
high school.
Hadn't you been connected with the Saginaw Tourist
Oh, I was
Convention?
at one time I was president of the Saginaw Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I've been president of the Church Guild 3 different times. And I've had different church offices. I've always gone to Bridgeport Community Church, never belonged to any other one.
Name all the places you traveled that you can think of.
Oh, I've been to almost any interesting place probably in the United States. I've been to Israel, been to Rome, Germany, England, Ireland, Scotland, Greece, Hong Kong, the
Africa.
Philippines,
Africa.
Africa. I went to South Africa, down to Johannesburg, saw elephants and giraffes out in the wild while we were riding in a Jeep.
Australia. Have you ever been to Australia?
No, I've never been to Australia.
Greece.
And the Greece,
Mexico?
Athens, Mexico,
Canada?
Cancun. We've been on cruises.
Caribbean. Bahamas.
Yeah.
Finland?
Yes.
Alaska. Where's Alaska?
Been to Alaska.
What were your most favorite places that you visited, Grayce?
Well, I would love to go back to Israel, and I liked Hong Kong, and I liked England, Ireland, and Scotland. I liked Copenhagen.
Why did you like Israel in particular?
Just so much history to it. you know, you hear about these places in the Bible, and it was just interesting to be there. I always enjoyed traveling. We were in Manila when the travel agents went there, and they said that they were going to bomb the travel agents. And the day before we left, why I called Washington or wherever it was, and they said, no, everything is all right. They're watching everything. So we got there, I think, on Saturday, and we just, you know, looked a little around the town, and Sunday night was the opening of the convention, and they just started the program, and they were showing some pictures of, what was the battle that, with the ships? The ships were shooting at each other, and I thought, oh my gosh, they've got it on so loud. And it wasn't the ships shooting at each other at all, it was a bomb that had gone off. Was it about 4 rows behind us and maybe 6 seats over? I was brushing ashes out of my hair, it was that close. And they brought the people that were hurt out in the aisle right next to us. And we just stayed there until the main people left, and all the buses were outside waiting to take us back to our hotels. And so the next day, the first thing, we tried to get away. And Bill went to the airlines and the travel agencies trying to get someplace just to get out of Manila. We didn't want to stay there. We were up like on the 23rd floor of the hotel, and I didn't want to stay up there because I thought, well, if they bomb it, I don't want to be up here. And we went down in the lobby, and then that wasn't a very good place to stay because if they wanted to bomb us, they could throw a bomb in the front door of the hotel. But it ended up then that we got passage out to go to Hong Kong. And we had planned to stop in Hong Kong anyway, so we just got there probably 4 days early. That was really a scary thing. Well, as of now, everybody seems to be well and happy. Dorothy and her family are here with a lovely home on the lake, and Martha's the only one we're missing. She's in Indianapolis. Jerry and Helen have a condo up at Elk Rapids, and I think probably all their family is up there. Lyle and Julie are doing well. He is sales manager for the Marriott hotels at the airport, Marriott Hotel at the airport. And Morris and Molly are doing very well. Morris is the one in a wheelchair, and Molly has done a great job of keeping him in good health. And they have one daughter, Amy, and we're going up to help her celebrate her 18th birthday tomorrow. Jim and Judy have their hands full with a lot of kids. 2 of them are in college. One decided to quit and sell perfume, but that didn't last very long. And the rest, the 2 youngest ones, are still in grade school. And who else?
Care of all your kids, I think.
Period.
That's good.